A group of human rights attorneys have filed a joint submission urging the United Nations to review abusive solitary confinement practices used in the U.S. against Black Americans. The submission, which comes ahead of the UN officials' April trip to the U.S. to review issues related to racial justice and equality in law enforcement, details the physical and mental health repercussions of solitary confinement. The UN's visit is part of a 4-point agenda to end systemic racism and human rights violations by law enforcement against Africans and people of African descent. Delia Adeoyobo, staff attorney for the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights U.S. Advocacy and Litigation Program, one of the organizations involved in the submission, explained that oftentimes advocates lose sight of what happens to people post-conviction. More than a third of people held in solitary confinement become psychotic or suicidal within the first 15 days, according to the submission. Those who have been subjected to solitary confinement are 78% more likely to die by suicide within a year of being released from prison. There have also been reports of those who have spent time in solitary confinement experiencing hypertension, chronic headaches, trembling, sweaty palms, extreme dizziness, and heart palpitations. Solitary confinement can also exacerbate pre-existing conditions and cause hypersensitivity to light and eyesight deterioration. Because of these effects, the submission says, solitary confinement is considered torture under international law. Adeoyobo told The Hill one of the reasons the submission focused on Black people is because not only are Black Americans more likely to face incarceration than white Americans, they are also more likely to be placed in solitary confinement. Black men make up 40.5% of the total male prison population and more than 43% of men in solitary confinement, according to a 2019 study by the Correctional Leaders Association and the Lehman Center at Yale Law School. Meanwhile, Black women make up only 21.5% of the total female prison population, but 42% of women in solitary confinement. Adeoyobo added that there's little evidence to show solitary confinement increases safety in jails and prisons. In fact, studies have found that recidivism rates for those leaving solitary confinement were 35% higher than those who had not been held in solitary confinement. Adeoyobo said she hopes the submission will highlight the work of organizations trying to reform solitary confinement rules, including those working to pass legislation akin to the International Mandela Rules, which would prohibit those who are incarcerated from spending more than 15 days in solitary confinement. She also wants to see mandatory public data reporting on how long and how many are in solitary confinement in local, state, and federal prisons and jails, as well as youth centers and immigration detention centers. She also wants to see an immediate end to solitary confinement for young people and people with disabilities.